So, you know how a lot of people in the Xeno community, myself included, like making fun of Xenosaga II and just saying it's bad? Well, it is. The only time I will ever talk about my personal ranking of the Xeno games anymore is to say that Xenosaga II is the one on the bottom. But I think the intro of the game is actually really, really good, and I'm just gonna kind of go to bat for that and explain why I think that's the case. This will involve spoilers, but only because Xenosaga II is a direct continuation of Xenosaga 1. I'm just going to be talking about the first, hour, roughly, of 2, so there's nothing spoilery there, but again, this does pick up directly after Episode 1, so a ton of stuff is implicit in that. Even though I said 2 does pick up right where 1 left off, that's not completely the case, because most of what we're going to be talking about in this video is actually a flashback, because instead of immediately starting with a spaceship descending down towards Second Miltia, we actually start with a ship gating out above the original Miltia. This is not something that's directly stated. There's no subtitle saying Old Miltia 14 years ago, but once the news report starts talking about Realians going berserk, and the fact that a lot of them were ones that have been recently repaired in the Miltian system, it should start being enough to clue in an Episode 1 player to realize this is the moment they're talking about. The first character we're introduced to is also someone new, this orange-haired guy who we'll later learn is a Realian named Kanan, and he's conversing with someone we will actually know from Episode 1, Helmer, although this time he isn't dressed in his usual purple robes of a Federation Parliament member, but in a military uniform. Kanan's confused about why he's being chosen for whatever this mission is, because, he's a Realian, they're going berserk, this seems like a very bad idea, but Helmer reassures him, saying that because he's been specially configured by Vector, he's guaranteed to be okay. Another person pipes up, saying that no ordinary human could pilot his craft anyway, and it turns out that this is going to be Kanan's co-pilot on the mission, none other than Chaos, who is strangely looking exactly the same age as he will 14 years later, and also, unfortunately, coming with an English voice actor change and a god-awful redesign. Yes, Episode 2's art style is not very good, and I'm pretty sure it has aged the worst out of the entire series, but because the art style is a complaint that you can apply to the entire game, I'm not going to talk about it when it comes to just the intro, and also saying everyone who was in the first game looks bad now goes against my narrative saying the beginning of the game is actually good, so we're just going to kind of pretend that part doesn't exist. At any rate, Chaos being here obviously adds more mystery to who he actually is, especially because Kanan asks him if he's sure he wants to go on the mission because, my craft isn't built for normal humans, and Chaos responds with, "Oh, that's why I'm here." So, just file that one in the back of your mind for later. I'm sure it won't be important ever. And then the two get a bit more briefing on their mission. It's apparently something top secret, they will not be receiving any support, also it looks like they're in some sort of mech, so that's useful. And they're also going to be under attack both by UTIC and by Federation craft, so it seems like whatever they're doing is so top secret, they're having to go against the majority of the Federation military. Also, when we switch from the talking to Chaos to the little briefing mech boot up sequence, the song changes from the theme First Meeting to something simply called Xenosaga II Opening Theme, but that's a bit deceptive because this is actually an instrumental version of the game's ending theme, Sweet Song, and this becomes a leitmotif that's used a lot throughout the rest of the series. It is also one of the best songs in the series. You're gonna probably be hearing it on loop for the rest of this video because it's just that good, so enjoy, I guess. We then get Kanan making the traditional heroic declaration of "Don't worry, I'll be back," but in his trademark monotone, and then we learn about what the objective of their mission actually is: to obtain the Y data, the very important MacGuffin that is currently located inside Momo as of 14 years later, so clearly it's not with her yet. And at last, the ES Asher is ready to launch, and we get what is my favorite part of this entire intro, based entirely around the framing of just this one shot, as we see Asher from behind as the launch bay door opens, slowly exposing only a fraction of the frame to the light from the orange sunset sky, as the title fades in. Xenosaga Episode 2. Jenseits von Gut und Böse, I am sorry German speakers, as the music swells to an even more triumphant high than before. After this one really amazing shot, which if you think about it, really is par for the course for the series. Ever since it went 3D in Saga 1, the Xeno games have had a lot of moments of just outright stellar cinematography. I'm not a film student, I don't know technical terms for anything other than thing look good, but thing look good quite a lot in these games, and props to Monolith Soft for getting all these good storyboard artists and animators to work on this stuff, because some of the cutscenes are genuinely quite impressive. Although, of course, a lot of ones in the bigger games like X and 2 aren't so, but if they save the cool stuff for the cool points when it's appropriate, I'm okay with that. But anyway, we get an action sequence right after this, as Kanan and Chaos have to fight their way down to the surface of the planet, and Asher even drops a weapon at some point, which comes back later for a really stupid joke in episode 3, so that's nice. And eventually they do touch down in the middle of a burning city. You do get a little bit more lore drop from a conversation where they talk about General Helmer and the URTVs, which will ring bells for any junior fans in the audience, and you also get to explore a little bit in the Asher, with even the combat not being bad right now because, well, it's the first tutorial fights in the opening area of the game. Of course, the mech combat's going to be simple, and you don't quite realize that mechs in this game are characters independent of your party members that gain experience and level up, which is just no, but you're not even going to notice that at that point, or you might even think that Asher's level and stats are coming from the characters piloting it, so that's a non-issue at this point. Progress a bit, and the Song of Nephilim activates, so that's kind of a big deal. And then Asher is saved by a green mech with a katana capable of cutting other mechs in half, and then by that mech's pilot who's capable of cutting other mechs in half with a katana when he's not inside his robot, who then takes his helmet off to introduce himself as Captain Jin Uzuki, Shion's older brother, who was originally intended to be playable in the first game in the series, and seems to be a lot cooler than you'd think he'd be based on Shion's descriptions of him later on. Another one of Chaos and Kanan's objectives is to locate and protect the URTV forces because obviously they're in danger, and Jin seems to know something about them, so he will actually join the party and lead the other two to something important that he thinks they need to see. Now, this is the only real instance of Xenosaga II. We didn't really know what we were doing-ness in this game because while you can play as Chaos, who was playable in the first game and is a main party member of this one, and you can play as Jin, who was supposed to be a playable party member and has some data in the first game and then becomes one in this one, you do not get to play as Kanan. Meanwhile, Kanan is a temporary party member in Xenosaga III for the first dungeon. He has an entire moveset and is actually able to show up in battles. Meanwhile, Kanan is just as competent. You can see him jump around just as fast as Chaos in cutscenes, but anytime you enter a battle, now he just disappears. So, good job on you, Episode 2, but that's the only real instance of this kind of stupidity, at least in this part of the game. And besides, you already are on the high of getting to play as Jin Uzuki, so it's not really too big a deal. Also, we're very early in the game, so the major flaws of the battle system haven't even completely revealed themselves yet, which is also really nice. You get your classic on-foot combat tutorial that you would expect from this section of the game, and then you run into a boss. Jin's got some data on him that he needs to try to expose to the world, so he can't stick with them for too much longer. Although, they are then interrupted by Colonel Margulis, Jin's superior, who has caught on to the fact that he was stealing his top-secret stuff, and then they fight. And I don't mean this in a bad way. Yeah, you have, in-game, you do a tutorial boss against him, and I actually died in my first playthrough because I'm not very good at video games. But, I mean, after you win that little story fight, then they fight in a cutscene, and it's ridiculous, and amazing, and it even gets a reprisal later on in the game with a nice callback to how this fight ends, which is the classic we'll both launch our strongest attacks at each other thing, and in the end, Jin collapses first, losing because he got hit pretty hard in the gut. Meanwhile, Margulis got scarred over his right eyelid, which is why he has a scar later on in the future. Jin then gives the data he was carrying to Kanan, tossing away his own drive after Kanan uploads it into himself, saying that it's safer with him, and that he still can't come with them because he has somewhere else he needs to be. We will learn about what this is much later on in the series. But at any rate, a strange wave of blackness starts encompassing the entire world, and it turns out that we weren't just playing through a flashback, but a memory, as Kanan is booted out of the Encephalon, being unable to remember to the point of being able to actually extract Jin's data from within him. He talks to Helmer, and they have a little conversation about things, asking about what happened to Jin. Helmer jokes about how, Kanan, you're supposed to have repressed emotions, because that's how you were designed and stuff. But then Kanan receives another mission, picking up Momo, who has just descended from orbit, and assisting in a dive into her subconscious domain to try and reclaim the Y data there. We then see a scene of Margulis talking to his superior, who we have not seen at all, or even really had hints that even existed at this point, a Pope dude who talks about different things, including albedo, as well as giving Margulis a new mission. And then he chats with Pellegri a little bit about people called Richard and Herman, things called the Vessels of Anima, which were awakened at the same time as the Zohar, and about the ESs. It seems like Pellegri is about to be entrusted with one of them, whatever that means. And then finally, this being about an hour and 15 minutes in, we get our recap of the events of the first game, as you see the Elsa safely cruising through the lower atmosphere on its way to the second Miltian spaceport. It's a nice little recap that is completely damaged by the fact that Xion has a new voice actress too, and all of the returning characters look really bad in this art style, but I think this is a really, really cool way of opening the game. It adds a whole new level of mystery. It actually puts some fights right up early on, and foreshadows a bunch of stuff that shows up in this specific game that wasn't really important to just episode 1, and then that's very soon followed up on by the amazing car chase sequence, and then fighting off Richard and Herman, which by like the 2.5 hour mark, 2:45, you'll then have the entire intro come around full circle as they're about to get attacked by Richard and Herman's mechs, or you do the story fight with them. Pellegri shows up in her own ES, and then Kanan comes in Asher, bailing them out. Junior recognizes him, and it turns out that Kanan and Chaos did actually make it to the URTVs and save them in the Miltian conflict. And then you go on to the whole Momo and Cephalon dive thing. That's a different big deal. But as a whole, mostly just that first hour 15, but also if you ignore the combat extending up to 2.5 hours, it's actually really, really good. I just wish the rest of the game had this much momentum behind it too. And until next time, this is Luxon, signing off.